In 10 days, class of 2024 quarterback Air Noland is going to be announcing his verbal commitment. Here's why he is the single most important recruiting target on Miami's board.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We are available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. So April 8th, it's coming up. That's when Prentice Air Noland is going to be announcing his verbal commitment, one of the hottest quarterback prospects in this class. Here are the reasons why I believe he is the single most important recruit on Miami's board, at least at this stage, right? It can evolve over the next several months, but for starters, this is a dynamic player, dynamic four-star quarterback who, yes, I believe fits perfectly in Shannon Dawson's offense. 6'3", 195 pounds, comes from a powerhouse high school program in Georgia, Langston Hughes High School, same high school where Miami got Joshua Horton, the defensive tackle, in 2023. And Air Noland, why I believe he's a great quarterback, not only for Miami's specific offense, but just for today's college football, because he's got those dual threat abilities. But I like the fact that Noland, he's not a run-first quarterback. He's definitely a pass-first guy, but he can improvise. And when the pocket breaks down, he's very elusive and very creative. And he's going to beat you to the sticks. And he's going to make plays with his legs. He can do that. And, you know, they don't call this guy Air for nothing because he's also got an excellent arm. But I think what really separates Noland from other quarterbacks in the class is he's known for a very fast release on his throws, which is a valuable skill set to take from the high school level into the college level because the pass rushes are only getting quicker and more dangerous, not less dangerous. And a quick release, that's not something that's necessarily easy to teach depending on the quarterback. So he's already got that. So, okay. Other reason why Noland is so important at this stage for Miami to hopefully land late next week. If you can get that verbal from Air Noland, not only have you found a solid quarterback for the future, but, and those of us who follow recruiting, you see this happen every year. We saw it happen with Miami last year. You see it happen with big programs who recruit well. You can build momentum in the class. That Air Noland could become the first big domino to fall because right now, Miami hasn't had that momentum for the class of 2024. It's still too early for me to worry about that. But right now, the Hurricanes only have one verbal commitment, and it's from a kicker. Best kicker in the class, but it's still from a kicker. Okay, so landing Air Noland on April 8th can completely change the complexion of Miami's class and Miami's recruiting momentum because Noland, he's already got a great relationship with some of the best receivers in the class. All of them respect him on and off the field. He's got a very good social dynamic personality. So if he does commit to Miami next week on the 8th, that puts Mario Cristobal in a much better position and Kevin Beard in a much better position with some of the top receivers that we track, like Jeremiah Smith, who I know is an Ohio State commit. But the fact that he's a local guy, Chaminade, and he is not only the best receiver in the country in that class, but arguably the best player in that class, period. And he's right in the backyard. Miami and several other programs, I'm sure, are not going to stop recruiting Jeremiah Smith until the bitter end. It ain't over until he signs that national letter of intent with Ohio State. Miami's going to keep trying to flip him. I don't think it's going to be easy, right? Because, you know, Brian Hartline is like building a dynasty up there in Columbus of wide receiver recruiting. He's doing an incredible job there as Hartline, who apparently Miami tried to hire him a few months back, but he ended up getting a promotion at Ohio State. But, you know, if you can land Air Noland, it puts you in a better position to try and flip someone like Jeremiah Smith, to try and land a commitment from Smith's teammate, another 5-star receiver, JoJo Trader, and from 4-star out of St. Thomas Aquinas, Chance Robinson, who we're big fans of on the show. And it helps Miami that Robinson, he's already a big fan of Kevin Beard, Miami's wide receiver coach. The two of them have a very good relationship, but Miami's going to be fighting with several other schools, including those schools in state, for the services of Chance Robinson. So if you're able to land a dynamic quarterback, that helps it, because guess what? 4- and 5-star receivers, they want to know and respect who's going to be throwing them the football when they come of age, right? They want to know, oh, I can pair up with Air Noland. That's going to be solid. And then listen, there is another big component here when it comes to wide receiver recruitment. A lot of the names that I mentioned, and there are other top receivers out there, are not necessarily going to be making verbal commitments as early as Noland is. Some of these guys are going to wait until we get a little bit deeper into the regular season this coming fall. So they're going to need to see that production on the field this year, right? They need to see Miami opening up their offense, going vertical, scoring more points. They need to see guys like Colby Young and Jacoby George, and hopefully Isaiah Horton, getting lots of catches and deep balls thrown in their direction throughout the year. So that's obviously going to help if Miami can improve the dynamism of their offense, but landing a dynamic quarterback in the class, that can build momentum, okay? So with Air Noland, an April 8th verbal commitment so early in the process, that's both a blessing and a curse, okay? It's a blessing because, like I said, for whichever team is lucky enough to get his verbal commitment next week, that can help get the ball rolling to land other commits, right? Because then you're going to start landing receivers and maybe some more offensive linemen as well, because they like to know who they're blocking for. But it's also kind of a curse in this day and age because there's so much time between April and National Signing Day in December that it gives so much time for other schools to get in and try to flip players. And as we've learned the last few years, recruiting doesn't end with verbal commitments. And hell, sometimes recruiting doesn't even end when a national letter of intent is signed. You saw what happened with Jaden Rashada in Florida. You saw what happened to Miami with Antoine Jackson. So, yeah, I mean, an April 8th commit, you still have to keep recruiting that player throughout the process, but it's going to help, right? So, okay, the trillion-dollar question here is, where does Miami actually stand with Noland? So the consensus right now, and I talk to people about him all the time, Miami appears to be in a slight lead right now, but very few people are confident enough to drop a prediction. He has no crystal balls on 24/7. I'm not confident enough. Maybe at some point in the next 10 days I will be, but right now I'm not confident enough to drop a Donno ball for Air Noland. Sometimes with players, you get those pre-commitment leaks from families or someone in the player's camp. And then, by the time they put the hat on, we all know which hat they're going to put on. 10 days out, we haven't had those leaks just yet on Noland. We'll see if we ever get those leaks on him, but we haven't had any of those yet 10 days out. So again, the consensus appears to be Miami is in the lead, but it's not a commanding lead. You hear a lot about how constant communication takes place, and he's been down here to visit unofficially multiple times, but there's constant communication between Air and Cristobal. Air Noland's mother even joked, I saw Stephen Wagner talking about this on On3, that Air Noland's mother even joked that he talks to Mario Cristobal more than he talks to his own mom. How about that? So there's constant communication taking place. The On3 tracker, their prediction machine, gives Miami, they give them a lead with a 19.8% chance. They're just ahead of Texas A&M in this order, by the way: Texas A&M, Alabama, and Ole Miss. Other people have suspected that Clemson is in the race as well for Noland. So, maybe you consider those 5 schools, and he's wanted by dozens of schools, but you can maybe consider those 5 schools as being the leader for him. Miami is believed to be the leader. For what it's worth, one of the many recruiting analysts that I've asked about Noland in recent days told me that he would be surprised if Air does not pick Miami next week, that he would be surprised if that doesn't happen. So I'm cautiously optimistic. A lot of the narrative can change between now and next Friday, but I am cautiously optimistic. Or I guess that's next Saturday. I'm cautiously optimistic at this time that Air Noland is going to pick the University of Miami. And I believe Miami will try and take 2 quarterbacks in this class. I've said it before, I'll say it again. They tried to take 2 last year, and then the whole Rashada saga happened. So Emory Williams, who I like a lot, ended up being the one and only. But I think this coming cycle, 2024, Miami's going to try to land 2. My preference would be Air Noland and AJ Hairston out of Monarch. That those would be the guys. Those are the 2 that I want. Noland and Hairston, I think, could be a dynamic duo in the class coming in. So hopefully we can speak that into existence. Or if we're like our pal Chalupa Batman, we could tweet out one of those prayer circles with all the candles, Air Noland and AJ Hairston to Miami. Can we get a Chalupa? I know you've done this before, but can you give us another prayer circle, sir? All right, so we will continue here on Locked On Canes. I want to talk more about players who have really stood out so far in spring football, because we talked about a handful of these yesterday, but there were so many names we didn't get to. And I think there are other players who deserve props. And I want to answer for you guys a question I was asked on another show this morning. What evidence do we actually see right now that Mario Cristobal is making this team better? I want to answer that and more for you when we come back here on Locked On Canes. And you know what, guys, you should use this opportunity to sign up at FanDuel. We got a basketball team in the Final Four, and they're underdogs. You got an opportunity to bet Miami plus 5.5 against UConn this week. We're heading into the Final Four. There's no better place to get in on all the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So you have literally nothing to lose on that first bet. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net next Monday, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So do not miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We are available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. And make sure after you make us your first listen, make Locked On College Basketball your second listen. I had a chance to talk on a recent episode with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton about the Hurricanes, their Final Four run. These guys are grinding. And by the way, Isaac and Andy, they're pretty bullish on Miami. I think they're both picking UConn, but they're pretty bullish on Miami and what they've done up to this point in the tournament. So make sure you check on Locked On College Basketball, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. So let's talk a little bit more about who's standing out in spring. I know we talked a lot about this guy on Monday. I wanted to circle back and talk about Rueben Hurricane Bain again, because again, the reports that we got here on Locked On Canes coming out of the scrimmage on Saturday, which was double secret scrimmage, the media could not get in. So we relied on reports and accounts from, the VIPs and some coaches and players who were there. Mario talked a little bit about it yesterday. But we had been told coming out of Saturday that Rueben Bain looked excellent, that he looked great in that partial scrimmage. They ran about 35, 40 plays in that scrimmage, that Rueben Bain, incoming freshman edge rusher, just looked really, really dynamic. And we got a further account of that. I was listening to the Joe Rose show this morning on 560 WQAM. I will be filling in for Joe this coming Monday, by the way. And Joe, he was one of those select VIPs who got to watch the scrimmage. And he was raving about Hurricane Bain. Joe said that Bain was lining up everywhere on the D-line, making plays all over the place. We talked about there was reportedly a sequence in that scrimmage where Bain recorded sacks on back-to-back plays, which had to be something to watch out there. And he's, according to Joe, he's also really catching the attention of Jason Taylor, his new defensive line coach, that apparently Joe and Jason had a little sidebar talking about how awesome Rueben Bain is. So you're not going to be able to keep this guy off the field. You're not going to be able to keep Rueben Bain off the field this year. And so it almost makes me, and I don't think he's going to lead the team in sacks. Maybe he will, because he got like 40 sacks a year in high school. Nobody else was doing that. I think that the leader in sacks this year is going to come down between Akeem Mesidor, who is back practicing this week, which is awesome. He missed the first 2 weeks of spring. He's back. Akeem Mesidor and Nigel Kelly. I think those are the prime candidates to lead the team in sacks this year. I'm not forgetting about Jafari Harvey, but I think he'll be probably just behind those two guys. But then you have to wonder, like, where's Bain going to fit into that? Because you're not going to be able to keep this guy off the field, and he's so dangerous. Like, is Rueben Bain going to have a true freshman year where he gets like 5 or 6 sacks? Can he do that? Nigel Kelly had a really good freshman year last year. He had 4 sacks, limited usage last year. So Bain might be able to do even better than that this year. I'm so encouraged by what I hear. And going back to some of the players that Cristobal talked about yesterday, on this show, we also need to give more love to both the twins, Robby and Bobby Washington. Now, Mario, I'm so glad to hear and see, because I watch him out there as well in practice the other day. I'm so glad to see how well Bobby is doing, because first of all, I think Bobby, as a 3-star coming out of high school, was underrated. I think he should have been a 4-star. And I think because he was only a 3-star, doesn't get talked about enough by the fan base, right? Because there is rightful excitement, because you should be excited about Malik Bryant, who's not on campus yet. And you should be excited about Popo Aguirre. But I don't think there's enough excitement about Bobby Washington, because he's just not as highly rated coming out of high school as those other guys. But according to Cristobal and according to my eyes, he's doing really well. This is what Mario said about Bobby: just a really big size speed guy who will strike you. He can go, Mario said. And another player we didn't talk about yesterday, because Mario rattled off so many names when we spoke to him after practice. We didn't give love as we should to Daryl Porter, the cornerback, because Mario says that Porter is really standing out and playing at a high level out there. So that was someone else I wanted to give some love to. I was on a guest on the Miami Sports Music morning show, Clock Blockers, this morning with my guy, Stephen D, who, he's not in the mud the way that we are, living and breathing orange and green, covering the Hurricanes. So he asked me like a really good question from outside the bubble, right? Like from outside the Hurricanes bubble. And I gave him the best possible answer, I think, that I could. Like, is there any actual evidence that Mario Cristobal is making this team better? Because keep in mind, we had some pretty high expectations for year one last year, and the team stunk. Okay, 5-7 last year. They were awful. So, he's asking me, do we have any actual evidence that he's making the team better? Now, you may be able to argue that, there's no real evidence that the team is getting better until you actually see how they play next year in the regular season. That's fine. I get that. But my answer as to how he's making the team better is the talent floor is being raised considerably, right? And yes, down the road, development of these players and game day coaching, right, when you're calling your timeouts and all that stuff, that's obviously important. Those are important ingredients to winning games. But I think the single most important ingredient to building a program is the actual talent acquisition in recruiting and in the transfer portal. Because, folks, it's not a coincidence, and I'm not saying these teams aren't well coached, but it's not a coincidence that teams like Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State are, constantly near the top of the nation, because they're constantly stacking 5- and 4-star players in recruiting, right? Talent acquisition, it's the most important part of the formula. And Miami is beginning to do that. They had a strong 2023 class, very strong. And, we talked about Air Noland and what he can do for the momentum in 2024. Hopefully Miami can put a similar class together for 2024, but you're starting to see the talent acquisition happening, okay? The floor is being raised, and that usually starts at the line of scrimmage, which is the way Miami's building it from the inside out, right? You look at Miami's projected starting offensive line next year. When you go left to right, Jalen Rivers or Zion Nelson, Javion Cohen, Matt Lee, Inez Cooper, Francis Mauangoa, and a deeper looking bench than last year. That should significantly improve Miami's offensive output, right? Even before a single play is called, if you can actually win at the line of scrimmage, Miami could do better with Josh Gaddis. I hate to even bring that name up, but even if Josh Gaddis was still here, Miami could do better with a significantly better offensive line. Now, I expect with Shannon Dawson, the game plans to be spicier and the play calling to be better, but having a significantly improved offensive line is going to drastically raise Miami's floor. So I think that's an important start for that. The defensive line, very blessed at edge rusher, thinner in the interior. Yes. So we're going to hope that, guys like Gore, Ahmad Moten heading into this, and Mario complimented Moten. He did say that Moten picked up a little bump yesterday, but that he's going to be okay. Like, it's not a significant injury, but that he's starting to do a lot better out there. And, Branson Dean, his addition hopefully can help. And obviously Leonard Taylor, who's not playing in spring, but, he needs to have a really good year this year. So the interior is more of a question mark. But when it comes to pass rushing, Miami should be one of the better pass rushing teams in the country, and that can help raise their floor. So another thing for me is, hopefully this year, everyone on this team, I can only pray, everyone on this team is 100% buying in. Right? You had some carryovers last year who didn't mesh with the coaching staff. They were used to doing things a certain way with the previous coach. And they basically, a lot of these guys gave up on the season and they gave up on their teammates. That cannot happen again. Right? You remember what Cam Kinchen said, who's one of the leaders on that team, one of the best, probably the best player on the team. What Cam told the team at the end of last season: if you don't want to be here, get out. Okay. Like, if you don't want to be at Miami, the transfer portal is open, man. So I'd like to think that everyone who didn't want to be here is now out the door. And hopefully Miami's going to have 85-man roster, whatever it is. Hopefully you have a full roster of guys who actually want to be here and are fully bought in. So that's my answer as to the evidence we have that Mario Cristobal is making this team better. There's a lot we still need to see on the field, obviously, but the ingredients he's cooking with are getting better. Like, he's not shopping at the dollar store anymore. He's shopping at Fresh Market now. Like, he's just getting better groceries, getting better ingredients. So we can only hope and expect that that's going to translate into more wins on the field. When it comes to the court, the wins have been easier to come by. What do the odds tell us and the stats tell us about Miami's chances against the UConn Huskies this Saturday in the Final Four? Let's talk about that here on Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We are available free wherever you get your podcast and available free on YouTube. So I mentioned Miami Hurricanes, FanDuel odds, they're plus 5.5 against UConn. The UConn Huskies are 5.5-point favorites against Miami. I understand why, like, when it comes to making the number, okay? UConn has not only been winning games in the tournament, they've been dominating opponents. Their margins of victory thus far, I believe Miami's faced tougher competition through their road than UConn has, but UConn's margins of victory have been 28 points, 23 points, 15 points, and 24 points. So they're winning every game in the tournament by double digits. So you know what? When most of the sports bettors out there, when they look at UConn minus 5.5, they probably consider that a bargain. They're like, well, they're going to win this game by 20 like they do against everyone else. So UConn minus 5.5. It would not surprise me if this number gets larger throughout the week. That's why I'm going to wait. I'm going to be betting on Miami to cover the spread, but I'm going to wait until Friday or early Saturday to kind of see where that number settles, because it would not surprise me. I'm not always right about this stuff, folks, but it would not surprise me if what's minus 5.5 right now turns into 6.5 by the end of the week. So I'm going to wait, because I feel like more of the money is going to be coming in on UConn minus 5.5, but I absolutely think Miami's going to cover. I think they're going to win outright, but I think they're going to cover. Hurricanes, reasons why they're going to keep this game close, okay? One of the best free throw shooting teams in the country. Like, you saw how that helped them come back against Texas and bridge the gap. So great with their free throws. Hopefully they can get to the line. Miami, very well-rounded with their scoring, right? So Miami's not the type of team where UConn can just shut down one scorer and keep Miami like under 60 points the way they did against Gonzaga. Because listen, if you shut down Isaiah Wong, Nigel Pack, Wooga, Jordan Miller, some Bensley Joe, somebody else is going to go off if you try and, double and really key Isaiah Wong out of the game. And that goes for obviously anybody else on the roster. The Hurricanes had 5 scorers in double figures against Texas, and that sort of thing is a pretty common occurrence for this team. Very well rounded with their scoring. Miami also didn't happen last game, but historically, they shoot the 3 very well. Highest clip in the ACC last year. So the Hurricanes have a lot of different ways to keep this game close to go along with their very active defense. And, Miami is not always the better rebounding team on the floor, but Norchad Omier is usually the best rebounder on the floor. So these are reasons why I believe Miami is absolutely going to keep the game close, and why I think it's going to come down to a final possession or two in either direction. With that said, UConn is obviously very tough, right? Adama Sanogo is an absolute weapon. Jordan Hawkins, the way he shot the 3 ball against Gonzaga, he can get hot, right? If he starts draining those threes, hopefully Miami can weather that storm like they did against Texas. But UConn's got a lot of scorers, and they're very good at defending the 3 ball. UConn has held opponents, I think, I don't know if it's under 28%, under 29% in shooting threes. So they're a tough team to shoot the 3 against. So this is not going to be a cakewalk, but you know what? All Miami has done is disprove the doubters every step of the way. They were supposed to get killed by Houston. Instead, they killed Houston. They were supposed to lose to Texas. They mounted a pretty awesome comeback and beat Texas. They were supposed to lose to Indiana. So, yeah, people are probably looking at UConn and saying, oh, well, they just embarrassed a really good Gonzaga team. They're going to steamroll Miami. Just wait. Nobody's getting steamrolled in this game. I don't believe Miami's going to steamroll UConn. I don't believe Miami's going to get steamrolled. I think this is going to come down to a final possession or two, and I think Miami's going to pull it out. I think that their experience and their coaching is going to give them the edge in this one. So I absolutely cannot wait. And by the way, folks, on tomorrow's episode, we are going to have the voice of the Hurricanes, Joe Zagacki, on. He's on his way out there right now to Houston. He's going to join us from the old hotel tomorrow. So we're going to talk with Joe Z on tomorrow's episode. So that's going to be fantastic. All right, guys, thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. Be sure, support our show, support this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. If you want to subscribe on one of the audio channels or all of them, we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review as well, if you don't mind. We'd like to shout those out on the show when those come in. And we will talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.